Hello everyone, this is update for October 18, 2024, day 968 of the war and of the date update. Also catch up for October 17 and 16. So as promised, I'm going to start with macroeconomic update and then I'm going to switch to the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine. Actually going to discuss this news about North Korean troops going to the front line in Ukraine. And then I'm going to touch a little bit about, again, this Iron Dome in Israel. So first, let's look at Japan. So then they have numbers for export and import. And as you can see, they're not looking pretty. Export is declining while import is growing. So this is basically death for Japanese economic model, which I mentioned before, is really export oriented. So the value added is generated by processing raw materials into finished goods and selling those, and also machinery. And that model is largely broken, and you can kind of even see it from trade balance, which is negative. And is actually consistent in a negative prior period, which is probably was August, was negative as well. Now it's sort of less negative, but the general idea is that so far Japanese economic model is broken, and there's a big question how Japan is going to find the way out of it. And the even bigger implication for the West and more so for the US is that Japan used to be source of capital, because all of that value add then, or sort of net income, it turns into capital that's being provided to the West, specifically to the US. So that's another sort of source of reasons why interest rates in the US are not likely to go much lower from where they are right now. Then let's switch to the situation in China. And things in China are going more or less the same. They've been going on in the past. Sort of things are not great, but Chinese, I guess, government is managing to control this difficult economic situation that they're in. First, real estate bubble continues to deflate. So you can see housing prices declined 5.9%. There's essentially no growth in fixed asset investments. So this is your future growth in the future periods, because this is you buying new equipment to produce more things, and that thing is definitely not growing there. Industrial production, though, popped up a little bit in September. At the same time, as you can see, for year to date, industrial production is still lagging. So, which really means that it was up in the beginning of the year, and now it's sort of in a negative trend relative to the rest of the year. At the same time, retail sales a little bit up, and actually unemployment rate a little bit declined. So that's what I said, that China more or less sort of manages through difficult economic situation. And also, if you look at the export situation, export declines significantly, as you can see, to 2.4. At the same time, Chinese are controlling their imports pretty well, unlike Japan. And so their business model, which is exactly as Japanese is, except for used to be lower sort of value add products, is still live and okay. It's, as you can see, it's smaller positive trade balance, but it's still pretty significant and pretty large. So we can kind of conclude that this is the sort of magic tool that Chinese government is applying to sort of sustain all of these problems inside of country, and specifically this real estate bubble. So again, basically the same trend continues the way it used to be, and the same as for Japan, that their own trend continues there as well. Now let's look at the situation in the U.S. Just quickly want to mention that the government debt hit new high, 35 almost 0.8 trillion. Sure, it's gonna hit 36 trillion in not distant future, but I want to focus on other things in the U.S., which is labor market, and labor market remains to be okay. The same trend continues. It used to be in the U.S. where job market is kind of moving along. There's not much hiring, but there's not much firing. So it's more or less stable, and it really sustains U.S. economy. So the same sort of difficult situation overall, but labor market allows to keep things moving in the U.S. So and there's no indication that this is going to change anytime soon on the horizon. This is actually, I want to thank you for those who decided to contribute for the development of the book where I'm working on, and for those who haven't heard, I'm working on the book about German invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941 from June 21st, which was the day prior to invasion, and about December 5th, 1941. So that's a very distinct period of that war. And right now I'm working on the Army Group South. So there were three army groups: North, Center, and South. So I decided to focus on South just because it's closer to Ukraine and so on. And I think it's also there were quite a lot of interesting sort of developments. So this is very based on the archive documents from German General Staff. So this is not sort of my interpretation. This is exactly precisely how the war was viewed through the lenses of German General Staff. So if you want to contribute, you're welcome to do so. That's a sort of small advertising, I guess. Now let's actually look at the fiscal situation in the U.S. Finally, U.S. Treasury Department issued their statement on the performance in September, and it also coincided with results for entire year, because fiscal year in the U.S. starts on October 1st of the year and almost ends on September 30th of the following year. So U.S. just finished its fiscal year on September 30th, 2024, and we can look at the results. So first of all, September result was actually positive. There is surplus, which is obviously positive. There is no question about it. At the same time, I think more important is to look at what's going on throughout the entire year, because it's more stable, more reflective of general trend, because sometimes months can jump back and forth significantly, because all of this accounting is actually cash-based, which probably may not mean much for most viewers. But what this really means that sometimes you can have big cash outlay and it looks really bad because your expenses basically higher, but revenue didn't come. But it's coming, let's say. So that's a significant drawback of this approach to accounting. It's called cash-based, and so that's why it creates sometimes misleading picture of, if you look just at single months, if you're not looking at least on a quarterly basis or semi-annual and so on. And obviously annual is most reliable because it clearly shows you trends. So the key takeaway is that U.S. deficit is 1.8 trillion, which is, I don't think there is much of a surprise. So it kind of continued the trend. It didn't break the record. Actually, it's high. It's higher than in fiscal year 2023, which would be from October 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2023. At that time, I think it was 1.6 or 1.7 trillion. So as you can see, it's higher. What is more interesting is actually I looked up U.S. government debt. It actually increased for the same period by 2.3 trillion. So as you can see, that this actually debt increase is higher by roughly 500 billions than actual deficit. So what I'm trying to say was this, that in some way this number of deficit is misleading, because there is probably some other sort of financing that's going on that's not reflected in the formal statement, or it's called off-balance sheet financing going on, or basically expenses that we are not seeing directly in this report. And so in some ways it's like an iceberg where you see the top of it above the water, but the bigger part is under the water. In this case, it actually not exactly perfectly the same analogy, because the most of it is above the water. As you can see, 1.8 trillion versus another 500 billion there hidden under the water. But the key point is that actual increase in that is larger than its than what you can see directly from the statement. The other part that I want to mention is that net interest on the U.S. debt didn't hit 1 trillion as many were claiming. It actually, as you can see, 880 billion, and that's really, if you look at what interest rate on average U.S. government is paying to its lenders, it's 2.57%. So if we look at the reason for that is because there is a lot of debt that was issued a long time ago when interest rates were very low. So that really helps to bring down this interest rate to this level. But if let's say U.S. decides to reissue all of the debt at the current interest rates, and the range is between 3.8 to 4.8%, this would definitely hit over 1 trillion. And I want to guess right now, I didn't calculate, but it's probably going to be like 1.2 trillion, something like that. So that's so there is sort of more negative potential down the road to realize in this fiscal year, where interest rates are going to go up. But I think majority of negative potential already being realized so far, because as you can see, from 2.6 to let's say 4%, it is increased, but it's not from. It used to be probably like 1% to 2.6. So. And the other thing is that interest rate may remain at this level. Maybe will go a little bit lower, but I don't think they're gonna go much lower. And another thing is that in 1 year, the obviously old issued debt, like 30-year-old debt, it will not come due. Some portion of it will, certainly. So the point is that net interest is probably the growth in it is probably gonna moderate. Probably will hit 1 trillion in this fiscal year. But overall, I think the general takeaway from it is that trend continues, that debt is accumulating at a very high rate that is not sustainable. And that's a key takeaway. On the positive side, there were no negative shocking results that are not expected. This number was more or less expected, and sort of there's no surprises here. So now I'm gonna switch sort of more war-related topics. And first I want to mention about Israel. So there are reports that Israel is requesting another high altitude area defense system. I mentioned about it in prior video that Israel already got one, and this is another confirmation that Iron Dome is not enough. Israel wants second one, and it's called battery. I think there are 6 launchers there, or I don't remember, 6 or 8 launchers, and each launcher has 6 rockets. Again, proving the point that what Israel has is simply not enough relative to this rocket DDoS attack that Hezbollah and Iran can do in response. And obviously everyone heard that looks like Israel's response is going to happen before November 5th. We'll see what's going to happen there. Obviously, Russia is extremely negative. Has negative attitude. It's basically warning Israel not to retaliate against Iran, because obviously they have strong relationship there. Now let's switch to another allied country to Russia, North Korea. So there were rumors, or at least reports, that North Korea is sending its troops to Russia to fight on the front line, either in Kursk region or actually in Ukraine. And I mentioned that I think that's probably very low probability event. At the same time, the South Korean news agencies or intelligence agencies are reporting that North Korea is sending 12,000 North Korean soldiers to Russia, and I think already 1,500 are in Russia in Far East. So that's one part of the news. There are also videos circulating that are being presented as if North Korean soldiers, they getting Russian military uniform. It's actually unclear that those people in the videos are North Koreans, could be Buryats. There are other ethnic groups in Russia that have similar look. So that's not strong evidence. And obviously, South Korea would not be the most objective in this respect, because they obviously generally concerned and about what's going on with North Korea. So we'll see what happens. It's generally possible, but I still believe it's very low probability event, and so far I don't think there is any objective evidence that actually is happening. Now I'm gonna walk through the front line in a clockwise fashion, the way I always do, starting from north, and we're gonna jump into Kursk region in Russia. So far, Russian troops continuing their attempt to cut off, to basically close this bottleneck between Novoivanovka and Malolokhnya, based on information, very scarce information. This bottleneck is still open. At the same time, it's very clear that Ukrainian forces are in crisis in Kursk region. I would say in the long run, they will have to retreat back to Ukraine. Also, unconfirmed information, but Russian troops managed to capture this village Plech over here. So again, all signs are pointing to Ukraine losing its presence in Kursk region. This was a little bit earlier at the beginning of Russian attack against Ukrainian Ukrainian troops in Kursk region, which is Russia. Now let's look at situation north of Kharkiv. And things here are frozen essentially, nothing really major happening here. Now let's move to the North Luhansk section of the front line. And things here remain more or less the same. Strong Russian pressure with the main objective Kupyansk. Actually, Russian troops, it's not visible on this map, but they managed to get to the Oskil River north of Kupyansk, like right north of Kupyansk. So that really creates opportunity for them to establish bridgehead on the other side of this Oskil River. And again, similar situation, very close to getting close to Oskil River, south of Kupyansk. Again, this creates perfect opportunity for these pincers, north and south, and then creating bridgeheads, and then effectively forcing withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from Kupyansk, which would be very negative generally, because that really implies that all of the area between Oskil and Siversky Donetsk is going to be lost eventually. Now let's move to the next section of the front line, North Donbass. Northern sector is so far stabilized, nothing major was going on here. In the southern sector, Ukrainian forces continuing to lose ground. So Russian troops managed to increase their bridgeheads significantly on the western side of this freshwater channel near village Stupochky. So as you can see, the sort of length of it went up, and also Ukrainian forces are slowly but surely retreating also this area between Dachny and Kurdyumivka, where Russian troops also already on the western side of this freshwater channel. So essentially what I'm trying to say that defensive line along this freshwater channel is at this point broken, and this is just going to be slow but sure execution on the Russian side, where they're just going to be moving forward. And actually, objective is probably Konstantinivka, which is much larger town than Chasiv Yar, and that's probably where they sort of aiming at as the main, or let's say intermediate objective in this whole advance that they have here. Now let's look at the situation in the central Donbass front line. The northern sector remains more or less okay for now. So Ukrainian forces managed to contain Russian troops. I'm not saying that this is fully under control. It's more like a temporary containment. That's probably the best way to describe it. Situation around Selidova is getting worse by day. I did not update this map, but because there's not a huge advances, but essentially Russian troops advance a little bit more closer to this village Vishnever along this railroad here. This is railroad. And then Russian troops managed to make significant advances here towards Novoivanovka, and essentially capturing significant portion of territory here, where I'm showing is with the pointer. Then in the area between Novoselidivka and Izmailivka, so far Russian troops did not manage to make significant advances there. Yet they managed to, Russian forces managed to push Ukrainian forces out of Maksymilyanivka. So essentially this whole area is lost as well. And that really opens up opportunity for Russian troops to attack Kurahove, which is another major Russian major objective, and essentially last piece of this urban defensive line of Ukrainian forces before it's going to be just plain fields all the way to Dnipro River at this point, without really any major urban areas, and it's which means that it's going to be hard to hold too. So once this whole area, that Selidove, then Yernik, all of the Kurahivka and Kurahove lost, it's essentially then fairly easy movement to Dnipro River for Russian troops at that point. Now let's look at the situation on the Zaporizhya front lines. Things here are fairly quiet. No major pressure. There's always pressure by Russian troops around Velika Novosilka, starting from this area between Malinivka to Velika Novosilka, and then obviously Zlataneva. But so far, no major advances there. And again, it's not major pressures. Fairly low pressure by Russian troops. And I'll finish with the situation along the Dnipro River, where things fairly stable. Nothing really is happening here so far. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye bye.